is just always on, so I appreciate that. I'd like to call to order the first emergency meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and if Joanne could lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first order of business would be any adjustments to the agenda. Do we have any adjustments? No. We do not have any adjustments, so that one was quick. That brings us to public comment. Do we have public wishing to comment? We'll refresh our expectations on public participation. I think we have the microphone, the sign-in sheet, and the podium all set up as has been practiced. The intent is to allow a fair and adequate opportunity for the public to be heard while ensuring that the time allowed for public discussion does not interfere with the scheduled agenda. During the time allotted for public participation, members of the public may speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, except for personal matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, which shall be addressed through established policies and procedures. Members of the public may address the board within the guidelines provided in this policy. The chair shall be responsible for maintaining proper order and compliance with these guidelines. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees and/or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic as well as the time each individual may speak, and we are at 3 minutes currently on that. In the event of a sizable audience, we probably dispense with that particular one. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members and the superintendent only with approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Members of the board and the superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board, but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating issues. Questions must be addressed through the chair. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. All right, who do we have for our first speaker?
Crystal Nicholas Green. When I picked up my child from school today, they shared with me some conversation of classmates. Among this conversation, a classmate said, "Those people who talk at the school board meetings are so dumb." And apparently, there was some agreement with this comment. This harassing behavior took place in front of my child, and I expect that these individuals were knowledgeable that the child of one of these stupid speakers was sitting quite near trying to study and learn. When I attended this meeting last week, I listened with awe as a member of administration spoke about the school climate survey. They said, if an unsafe or dangerous behavior is reported, it should be taken care of, and it should be addressed immediately. I asked my child, who suffered dangerous blackouts due to masking, do you feel if you reported an unsafe or dangerous behavior, the problem would be taken care of and addressed immediately? My child responded, that all depends on what it is. If it's politically inconvenient, probably not. Sadly, although the comment that I first shared was expressed by a student, one can extrapolate that that feeling extends beyond the entire school system. It is interesting, for I have heard and read so very much about schools bending over backwards to accommodate certain groups. We have to have special books, special clubs, special guest speakers, which I assume all cost money, to be sure, to collect all of these special underserved people. We must even distribute special materials to hunt them down and recruit them rather young. Please be aware that any language of inclusivity, however, does not extend to student parents or their marginalized children.
anybody thinks that myself is stupid or whatever for standing up, my God teaches me to stand up for the people that are weak. And when sometimes I feel so weak standing up here talking, I realize that it could make an impact, you know, and eventually, you know, in future it will. Right now, maybe not. But it's just, you know, it's time to speak and it's time to not speak. And you know, we're going through some tough times. Our kids are going through some tough times. You hear, you want, you know, our school. I support funding our school, especially if it teaches our kids well, you know. And so I guess you're like here asking us stakeholders for money or what we want to do, and so that tells me that just as a stakeholder, as a parent, I should be the questions that I have and the, you know, concerns. I would hope that I would get some response at some point in time when it's more convenient. You know, it's very, you know. So I mean, like my son's in 3rd grade. The school has got subsidized about $50,000, and I have another boy who will start next year. So if he starts next year, just those 2 boys for 2 years will be $48,000. I'd love to have my kids go to school. I'm very worried that, you know, the things that they're teaching, the things that they allow are arbitrary and not true, and to be taught here, not necessarily be taught, but just okay to be here is very concerning. So I'm really on the fence on that. So if I took my kids out, that'd be $50,000 a year upon year. So, and that would probably hurt the school. I don't really want to do that. So basically, just when you have time to look over the stuff and my concerns, you know, get back to me, please. And maybe we can, you know, do something to make this place better. Thank you.
Anything else for public comment this evening?
My name is Susan Shaw. I'm from Turner. I'm a taxpayer and a business owner here in the town of Turner. This budget will not impact my family as my youngest son is graduating this year. So I'm not speaking on behalf of that as a parent right now. I'm speaking on behalf of as a taxpayer and a business owner. I've spoken to so many people since Friday and Saturday about this school budget, and the overwhelming message that I heard is people didn't come out to vote because they didn't know the vote was happening. Most of the people that I spoke with were very favorable toward the school budget as it stands, and I just caution you as you are making decisions in the next few days to not cut so deep that we can't get out of it. We've been discussing numerous times about kicking the can down the road. We have so many projects that need to be done. They have to be a priority. Your role as school board members is to present an honest budget, and you've done that. I also feel as though the issue that most people are taking with the school budget is in response to the national economy. This school budget is not going to change the cost of oil, the cost of gas. People are hurting, that's obvious. And this school budget is the only thing that people feel like they have control over to express their dislike for the current state of our economy. And I just hate to see a knee-jerk reaction to the no vote, especially with such a low turnout. I just wanted to share that. I've spoken to, like I said, a lot of people who just weren't even aware that there was a vote happening. So this time around, we need to make sure that people know the vote is happening, so that people who are interested in supporting the school system, if either a yes or no vote, will do so.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, that brings us to item number 4, and that is computation and declaration of votes. Board members will find in their packets individual sheets from each of the towns detailing those vote tallies that occurred on For the town of Turner, yes, 42, no, 54, blank, 0. For the town of Green, yes, 23, no, 58, blank, 0. For the town of Leeds, yes, 28, no, 34, blank, 0. Do we have a motion acknowledging and accepting those numbers? Yuri, do we have a second? Kyle, thank you. Discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? So we have completed that step of computation and declaration of votes. That was the easy part for tonight. That brings us to item 5, and that is board discussion of proposed FY23 budget. So first I want to thank everyone that's here this evening. Obviously this is a pretty compressed time frame in order to make this work, both from the standpoint of putting our best thoughts forward to the voters again, and in the interest of not keeping employees and folks in the district hanging without an approved budget before they go wandering off into their summer fun and excitement. So in order for this to all work and keep with the legal requirements of posting, dates, times, I think there's probably a wind speed one in there as well. Our meetings this week, today and Thursday, and posting of what our revised thoughts are on the budget need to kind of all work smoothly. So like I said, thanks to everybody who's worked diligently to bring forward some food for thought for the board, and to be here this evening as well, including our recording team as well. Thank you. So discussion, from a framing standpoint, I think lots of folks have shared some comments similar to those that Susan shared, as far as anybody who's done. Perhaps board members have some other things that they've gleaned in their conversations over the last few days, but I will be perfectly honest, and I think that as a board, members seem certainly disappointed by the result on the 19th, both from a turnout standpoint. I mean, if I went quick math, we have 3 towns that I'm not 100% sure what the registered voting population is, but we had less than 250 people that came out and voted on the 19th. So that's, while that is a disappointingly low turnout, it is an official vote. And I think we can all imagine that there are droves of folks out there who are 100% in support of what we put forward, but we have before us the results of an official legally binding vote that the majority of the voters did not, in fact, support the budget. So in light of that, in light of perhaps being interested in hearing what board members have been able to learn for any particular questions or particular concerns, the administrative team has presented board members with some additional food for thought on items that the team would recommend cutting. And my understanding on these recommendations, and certainly Teresa or any of our other administrators, happy to have you speak to them, but the recommendations were made with the thought in mind of having the least impact directly on students in the classroom. I think all of us have heard pretty loud and clear for the last couple of years that so what are the strategies, staff, and supports that the school system has in place to respond to student learning, student behavior, things that we're seeing as a result or in concurrence with the pandemic and the budget that was presented to voters had many of those aspects to it. So since this is kind of an odd place to be in, I am going to go from member to member and ask folks what their thoughts are. What Superintendent Brand has requested from a process standpoint is that the board direct the administrative team to a particular level calculations that correspond to some example levels in the handout the board members have. So I'm going to start with Kyle and work down the line, and Evan assures me that this cord on this microphone will reach as far as we want to send it. So let's see how graceful we all are. And if board members, if you could share both your thoughts on what is a desirable level to go back to the voters with, and perhaps if there's any other insight that you've gained from your conversations in the last few days.
My question would be, how did we get to some of these numbers all across the board? Like we're cutting 1% to 0.75%. What was the determination of that? And would we be able to get a higher discount, more towards the 2%? Or we have to raise it, I guess would be my question, to the 3%, that, so the 2.85.
So I can just try to out. So the numbers that were presented by the administrative team are potential cuts to get us to a lower amount of impact to the taxpayers. Like the budget that went to voters initially was an overall tax impact of 2.81%. The various levels that have been suggested for our consideration this evening range from a decrease to 2%, and that would be a $105,000 decrease, a decrease to 1.75% tax impact, and that would be $137,727, and on down all the way to reducing to a 1% tax impact to taxpayers. And board members may also find it helpful to review a couple handouts that Dean provided. There's a white sheet and I think this is canary, perhaps, canary yellow. So these are, the white sheet is, and I'm sure we have extra copies of these, is the budget that went to voters on the 19th with a tax impact of 2.81%, which corresponds to, for a $100,000 house, or $100,000 property value, sorry, in green, that is $32 for the year. And green is a calendar year, Leeds and Turner fiscal year, sorry. That is 23 for Turner and 53 for Leeds, and on down through. The yellow sheet shows those same sorts of numbers at cuts of 105,000, 127 for that 2% level. And I'm sure Dean can, where did he go? Once again, my personal vision is fantastic. So I'm certain that Dean could calculate those numbers at the other levels as well if board members were interested. We did have a question from a community member wondering what those dollar figures look like for a $100,000 property or $200,000 property, what that meant. Because I agree wholeheartedly, a $30 million budget, that to my small mind seems like a lot of money, but what does that mean to my personal budget? So perhaps those numbers are helpful in that regard.
Can I
don't know if that, Kyle, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I didn't actually had a chance to review the paperwork a little bit, so
Okay.
seeing it a little bit, I get that why they dropped it, some of that.
So and to clarify, it's the board's job at this point to decide what goes back to the voters, what this board supports. We go through the whole process again. This board has a vote on a budget. We have the in-person vote here at the high school again, and then we go to the validation again. So it's like an etch-a-sketch, kind of shape it and start again.
Fun.
Yeah, exactly. So we're at the exciting stage of making some indications as to what this board's preference is moving forward.
I'll dig a little more. Thank you.
So even though we have very low voter turnout, it is a vote, and I do think we have to respect what people told us. So I do think that we need to be looking at our numbers. We have questions in each one of these categories, Betsy, so it's hard for you to me to give you a number quite yet. I would look at a minimum of a 1% cut. But those are people cuts. So that makes me question that a little bit. Some of the cuts that I see at the 1.75% is fleet insurance. Is insurance something that we can cut?
Dean? And can other people hear us if we don't know? Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, I did discuss that with MSAD, our insurance carrier, and they felt confident we could make that cut at this time.
So fleet insurance is insuring our vehicles? What is that?
Yes, including buses.
So what would our insurance carrier be if we got into this? So if we don't have fleet insurance,
It's not.
We're
it's
not getting rid of fleet insurance, we're just reducing the amount that we had budgeted for fleet insurance based on recommendations.
thank you, that is helpful.
So with this list of proposed cuts and the different tiers, are we allowed to mix and match? Is that, or does everything have to stay in these specific categories?
Yeah, so
Is it a la carte or?
the board's in charge at this point as far as what we send back
Okay.
for a budget. However, we've asked the folks that we employ to do this work, to make their recommendations for the things that we could cut that would have the least impact on students. So
Okay, I just wasn't sure if, like, if we can take something from this and this and then, okay, what we can do at this point, what we need.
from a
to do.
process standpoint, we can.
Okay.
My own personal opinion is that I don't, the board can do whatever it wants. I don't like that idea because we've asked the
Okay.
folks that we employ to do this work to make their recommendations.
The TMS instructional coach, that is something that we had received a really lovely presentation from some instructional coaches on the curriculum policy committee, and that is one thing that I really don't want to have to cut as a board. I think that it would be incredibly helpful in the new year with identifying educational gaps for kids. I really would love for us to be able to keep that. In regards to the community, just a small, one or two people, where was it, on the proposed page, where it breaks down each of the towns' percentage. And at Leeds it was 4.5, it goes down to 3.6. If at some point we can have a clarification as to where that number comes from, and that it's not something that the board decides, and how we get that number. That'd be fabulous.
Yeah, so the totals, if we look at, and Dean, you're not close enough, you can kick me when I get this wrong, but I'm certain you can yell at me when I get it wrong. So if we look at the summary of proposed projected revenues and budgeted revenues, and down at the bottom of the sheet, you'll see valuation values for each of the three towns. For example, Green is $364,533,333. Leeds and Turner also have values. Those valuation numbers are calculated by the state and the process by which the state calculates those. So each town's share of the district does not directly correlate to the number of students they have. It directly correlates to that percentage of the total valuation. So the total valuation for the district has a huge number of zeros. 1, 0, 8, 9, 3, 8, 3, 3, 3, 3. So for example, Green at $364,533,333 is 33.46% of that valuation. That determines each town's percentage of the total. The percentage change for each town has to do with the increase from last year to this year and the change in that town's valuation. So you can only imagine each of our 3 towns' valuation changes in different ways each year.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
So that's, and that was a really long answer to your question. Is it
No,
something
but I-
the board has anything, the board has no control?
No control over that. Okay. Except I won't be put out as a budget to make it less, because it goes from 4.5 to 3.6 with a different proposed budget. Okay. And you wanted to know a number. I would be okay with the 2.0%.
I would agree with Jess that regardless of turnout, we still had a no vote, so we need to consider some cuts. It's just how far we're willing to go. I do think we should consider the fact that there was a low turnout. And, keep in mind, you don't have to strip everything. I had the same concern as Crystal did about the TMS instructional coach. I know we're worried about student teaching. That seems like a big one that could help in that area. So even though we're trying not to go a la carte, since we all mentioned that one, I didn't know if we could move beyond that
Yeah.
one.
So maybe just to clarify the set of recommendations that the administration has, or not really recommendations, we already voted on our budget, contain their recommendations. Each of these different levels, if you look at the far left-hand column,
Right.
this first set gets us to a 2%.
Right.
When we get to 1.75 in the farthest left, those items get us there. There is shared desire to keep the instructional coach, I would say, from the administrative team, given that it is all the way down at if the board wanted to get to a 1% increase. The administrative team is not recommending removing that unless the board wanted to get to a 1%.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does that help?
Possibly. So this would be the recommendations from admin of the 1% would be the last thing they recommend going. They recommend starting here.
I can.
So, yeah,
Yes.
maybe Teresa, and I think honestly, years ago, we approached the budget in this manner where we had several, and John's going to start shaking his head like that was not fun when we did that. We had several different increase levels and a set of parameters around that. It became difficult to sort through those. So I think maybe if Teresa clarifies what the information that the administrative team has given us tonight was designed to do, and then, Susan, did you have a question before Teresa?
I just had a question based on past experience with the situation that I think there may be some confusion. That 1%, is that a 1% budget-to-budget increase over last year, or is that cutting down 1%?
No, so
I think
so
that's where the confusion
two
is.
things. So the 1%
Yes.
would actually end up being a 1.1% decrease from where we are, 1.89% decrease from where we are today.
Right.
The
I got that.
budget- The budget we
Yes.
presented to the voters was a 2.81.
Yes.
If these recommendations, or food for thought more accurately,
Gotcha.
are items that would get us to a 2% tax impact, 1.75% tax impact, 1.5% tax impact, 1.25%, and a 1% tax impact. And there are reasons why we're away from this.
So I can explain the process. Last Thursday, when we learned that the vote did not pass, the admin team was directed to look at the budget again and see what cuts could be made. So when we start building the budget, we build it in October, we start in October, we're not done for a long time. During the course of us building the budget, the cost of fuel skyrocketed, I guess I'll just say that word. So we had our budget, the budget was approved by the board and went to the voters and was approved at the first meeting, and then failed at the polls to pass. So then we took that 2.81% overall tax impact and said, what would we need to cut from the budget if we went to a 2.0 overall tax impact to the budget? That means we'd have to cut $105,127. So then we scoured through our budgets looking for where we could come up with things, like the science robots, and the social worker stipend is for a position that's not even in existence because of some structural changes we're doing internally. District printing, we're going to go electronically. So if you go through that list, those are things, and like Betsy started with, we tried to take the things that were the least impactful for students and for staff. So, for example, the cutting NWA testing for kindergartners, that's something that's been ongoing conversations with the kindergarten team. And even though it's not a lot of money, we're currently using another screener for kindergartners that's free from the state. So we thought, okay, well, we don't need that. So these things that are listed here are because some of the administrators said, I'm not going to take a class, you can cut that. So that's what we got there. And then if you look at a 1.75 overall tax impact, those are the items that we discussed cutting to make up the $137,727. Does that help a little bit?
Perfect.
Sorry, it's easier to explain only because I was there.
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's important that the voters know, like, if we were to decrease it to like a 1.75%, what that would be looking like right now in the proposed budget. And, you know, right now it looks like that would be field trips would be cut out at a point when we're just getting back to field trips that I think are important. So I would be with Crystal, and my number would be 2%.
That's a good point. Can I just, Kathy brought up a good point. If we go to 1.75, we're not only cutting those things in that area, we're cutting everything before it, too.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
I think that it's important to talk about how well I think the Edmund team put together a budget with the cost of goods and services and everything else that everybody sees at home and everywhere else, that to bring a budget to the voters is at 2.81%. I think it was incredibly fiscally responsible. Having said that, I think that turnout was low, turnout's always low. And I think that if that's what it is, and the desire was to make some movement, then I would support the least impact, and I would go from the 2.81 to the 2.0%.
No pressure on me to move this without.
There we go. It's not projected. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm disappointed that we didn't hear pretty much a single comment during this budget process about cuts to the budget. So my assumption is that this caught people off guard. I talked to several people in the last few days that are feeling very bad that they couldn't show up at the board. I know these are tough economic times, and I think as Susan mentioned, I think that's part of what people are saying. If I had heard from the community regarding particular budget items, then I would have felt more comfortable making cuts. I didn't, so I would support the 2.0% and not anymore.
I don't even know where to start. I could live with the 2.0. I don't have the dedication to instructional coaches that other people do. I firmly believe that given time, to work together. Teachers can do what instructional coaches do for a lot less money than what we're paying instructional coaches. And that would be a huge savings right there. So I don't have that allegiance. I think my allegiance is more to teachers and what I know teachers can do. And instructional coaches are kind of adding another layer. I know they're just teachers, but they're also like a sort of a bridge between teachers and administrators. I've yet to figure out just what their role is. So I don't share the same feelings that other people do. Field trips, definitely I would not want to see field trips cut for any reason. I think they're one of the most important things that kids get in education, to give them different experiences. Having so many of the things to get us to 2% kind of explained away. I'm at a point where I can live with 2%. I guess my question would be, if we eliminate one new bus, does that automatically save something on fleet insurance? Maybe not the 2,000 that's down below, but I would think it would save something if there's one new bus that we're not running. But I guess I'm leaning towards 2%. I think the low voter turnout is sad, but it's historically what happens. I think probably what's sadder is that people aren't here tonight to express what they want one way or the other, because this was the opportunity to do that.
I don't know where it goes. Dean, could you touch on the bus?
It is going to Dean after.
It is going to you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And as far as the fleet insurance goes, MSMA, the way that they structured that is they won't bump that up in the first year of the new bus. They take that overall average. And then so what we'll see is next year, FY24, we would see that value increase. Good question.
In the interest of making this as complicated as I possibly can, I'll send this back down to Kyle.
Is the public allowed to ask questions?
We'll get to Kyle first and then absolutely.
On the field trips, I did a question though on that. Is that 18,000 cut all the field trips out, or is that just a cut of the total amount needed for field trips?
We had discussed keeping some field trips in. I know like at the high school, they do some career exploration, but it basically would take all of the field trips out of the budget. And honestly, what we budgeted for is probably not enough given the rising cost of fuel. So we've used the same number we've used for 20 years, maybe 20-ish.
And based off of, like, we were going back to the a la carte on this, like, can we move some of this stuff to get it more in line? Like, if we did get rid of, like, the instructional coach for Turner, which would be a huge savings, which would allow us to hold on to
If the whole board, on a majority vote, agreed to do that, otherwise it's provided, the board should provide the administrative team with direction on what tax impact we wish to get to and make their recommendations accordingly.
I think I'd be in favor of moving closer to the 1.25% and try to utilize some of the swapping of the a la carte of this budget.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Betsy?
Yes. And then we do have audience member questions. So.
Sorry. Our new gas tank. So we have a lot of talk about that, and that was a, if I understand correctly, a way for us to save Yes, please. Dean, do you want me to, or? Okay, over to me. The gas tank could not be installed in this budget year anyway, so we are not planning on eliminating it. We're planning on taking it out and putting it in next year, which is more in line with when it can actually be, when actually the work can be done.
I think we did have a question out here.
Yes. This is very helpful, and speaking on what a board member said about why people aren't contributing more. So, as a parent, I don't really know what child development services is, or state agency client tuition, or miscellaneous 78,000. Is there a place where we could see exactly what was being spent? So I guess it's a transparency issue. We just don't know what you're spending. Unless I missed something really big here. I just don't have the budget in front of me that you guys have.
And those budget details are all available. Certainly, if folks have questions through the process as the board members review the budgets line by line. Those information pieces are all available.
Was that at board meetings previous, or is that available?
Yep. No, so the board members each had binders with all the different pages that build all these budgets.
And so we have that information too?
If you request it, yes, absolutely.
So we have to request it of you?
Yes.
Thank you.
The vast majority of it is available on the website as well. In years past, the entire budget book has been on the website. This year, I believe the posting is the same piece that went to all households in the district. But these are not secret numbers. These are numbers that are readily available.
Do you mean the newspaper? There was something in the newspaper that came to families? Is
Yep.
that what you're referring to?
Yep, that was mailed to every house in the district. Was there a specific one of those items that shows up on the summary page that you had a question on?
Well, I am a little curious where the instructional coach lies, because it's not,
Yep, so that would be in one of the warrants. So the numbers that are on that summary piece show the entire budget. And the budget is broken down into various warrants as dictated by the state accounting powers that we need. Right, so are you asking, you mentioned child development services and state agency client tuition, that's on the revenue summary side of the sheet? Yeah.
it's just on here, and I'm not
Yeah.
really aware of what.
Right, with under the heading revenues, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Were there other specific questions that we didn't answer?
No, I just was not aware that the entire budget was available.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Is the district psychologist something that, like, is that something that we have to have, or is that, I mean, you know, psychologist, I mean,
So the psychologist is actually someone that tests students that may be struggling, and they perform standardized tests to determine a student's strengths and weaknesses, students with IEPs. If we do not have one in district, we have to contract out for a considerable amount more money, Rebecca?
who is doing that, like now, or prior to having, or do we have a psychologist, this is just an added to it?
We have, for our district our size, we typically employ 2. We currently just have 1.
Oh, so we won't add another one, I mean.
Because we've been contracting, and the amount of money we spend in contracting is more than we would if we paid one of our employees to do the same work. And it's actually better if it's our own employee, because they get to know the staff and students and work with them.
Be better, yeah. And I guess another thing, like as far as, like I noticed that it seems like this district is like a taxi cab for kids. Like they'll go just pick up 1 or 2 kids like all the time. I mean, is that And I realize, you know, kids need to get to school, stuff like that, but in my time and stuff, I mean, you got on the bus or your parents brought you, and I realize a lot of parents work, but is there any way that, like, we could almost figure out how to pool that, or maybe be like, look, you need to get your kid to school, you're the kid's mother or father, I mean, you got a vehicle, you got to get your kid to school because you can't do it all the time.
Yep.
Time's tough.
So what you might be seeing is we have students that on their individual education plan have specialized transportation, and that might be what you're seeing. Our students ride on their regularly scheduled routed buses, and then if a student becomes what we call, if they qualify for homelessness under McKinney-Vento, then we are required by law, by federal law, to pay for their transportation. So you may be seeing a few students, one student, that might be the case, but we don't provide individual rides for students to school.
Right, I know that, but I mean, like, you can't just call them on a cab, but I just didn't know if there was any way that, you know, and maybe in the future that could be revised to where, you know, you could do a little less to save gas.
I think both our transportation folks and our special education folks are always looking for ways to try and find efficiencies there. We do need to be cognizant of fulfilling our legal obligations, both to students and families at the same time, but I think that's an excellent question, and certainly even before diesel and gas prices where they are today, I think we have folks who are working pretty diligently to try to figure out more efficiencies, and I think I also have not weighed in as far as my thoughts on percentages or anything else. I think that's a pretty great segue. I mean, I think we're all feeling it in our family budgets right now, and we've heard another 5 months or experienced another 5 or 6 months of inflation that turns out it wasn't transient. Turns out it is pretty easy to see at the grocery store and at the gas station and in our heating bills and our electricity bills. So I think that there is no question that there are folks in our communities, all the folks in our communities, who are feeling that impact. So I think that certainly the sentiment that is out there that any increase is too much is real and has real impact on families' budgets. Having said that, I think that the district doesn't have quite the same ability to take one less trip to Auburn, or to take one less trip someplace, or maybe buy a store brand, given all of our legal obligations, both to transport students, to maintain safe facilities, and to honor the staff and compensate the staff that we are so very fortunate to have. A low turnout vote is still a real vote. I understand that. I understand that our communities are feeling the impacts of inflation, increased costs, as is our district. We see those increased costs in diesel. We see those the lights are on tonight. I'm sure we're seeing the increased costs there. So there are certainly impacts there. And I guess I would echo Yuri's comments earlier that kudos to the administrative team for taking a really diligent look at things. I want to be very clear, I do not feel that the budget that was presented initially and was approved initially by both this board and the handful of folks that came out at our first vote was irresponsible in any way. In light of the no votes in our validation vote, though, I do feel like it would be important for this board to acknowledge that and make some cuts. So for me, the 2% is where I'm willing to go. I agree that once we start going further than that, not that there isn't any impact on the things that need to be cut to get us to that point, but there's even more of an impact past there. And you know, there are still folks who think this is a pretty cool district to live in, and I hope that we can continue that. And looking at the dollar figures for a 2% on the golden line, and my arm is getting shorter, so you'll have to forgive me on that puts us at a $43 impact for Leeds, a $14 impact for Turner on a $100,000 property, a $27 impact for Greene. And I believe that that's a pretty be an acceptable sort of level. The other question was, is the board interested in or amenable to making that recommendation to the administrative team to recommend those, a budget that includes the cuts that have been described to get us to 2%. And if that's the board's desire, I would entertain a motion to that effect.
I'll move that we make the cuts that the admin team presented to us to get the school budget impact of the towns down to 2% from 2.81%.
Do you have a second? Second from Kathy. Discussion. Any additional points that anyone would like to make at this point? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? One opposed? So the motion carries to go forward with the 2% tax impact to the towns. And like I said, thank you to the administrative team for coming back with that detailed set of recommendations. What happens next is obviously the burning question next as well, looking at our calendars that were so very open and are not any longer. So my agenda item number 6 is to adopt the final proposed fiscal year 23 school budget. And I think for that we need to, Teresa, is it your impression that we need to have a motion that more specifically addresses that total dollar figure, or is what we just did for motion acceptable?
I think that's acceptable because if we look here, then we will have the budget warrants available and the board can decide, rewrite and adopt the final proposed budget. Sign the budget warrant, call for the district meeting vote, and the BVR.
So the steps on Thursday will be in order to make sure that we're in accordance with statute as far as the various signing of the budget warrants, because those amounts will differ from what we initially had, and will differ in the ways that were detailed in the administrative team's recommendations. So we'll have those individual pieces for the board to vote on again and sign as a legally attested copy, and then those copies would be posted as statute dictates.
Right.
And that, so that meeting will be,
So we can get the budget warrants up, they need to be updated now.
so the budget warrants will be updated. The board will see those, have the opportunity to vote and sign those on Thursday night. They'll be posted on Friday. The next vote is on June 9th, and then the budget validation vote will be on June 14th. That will be the local polling places in each of the 3 towns, and that will also piggyback on the votes that are already happening that day. And I understand completely that that means more work for the folks in our town offices than we were anticipating on those dates. To be honest, Green has urged us for several years to have our vote piggyback on that vote anyways. I do understand that the mechanics of doing that, at least for the town of Turner, are not smooth or appealing. So I really appreciate their assistance with that, Mr. Shaw.
I just want to make sure that you're clear, Betsy. On June 9th, when we do the district budget vote, this space and the auditorium space are occupied, so we're going to have to find a new space to do that. I haven't talked to Janet yet, and she's not here, but very likely we'll get her new.
So just so for anyone listening, the June 9th will not be in the auditorium as we did the last time. We have things going on at that time in the school year. That's surprising. Thank you for clarifying that. Teresa, did you think we needed a different sort of action?
Someone else's lead and reading from the bottom up, so I maybe should. So this says, we had to adopt the final proposed budget, but I'm wondering if Yuri's motion covers that, because the board did come to a decision. Do you want an extra vote?
I don't think it would hurt to have an extra vote to adopt the final
Apologies,
proposed.
I don't usually do
This is, yes. We have a motion to adopt the final proposed budget, and that would be, Yuri just very helpfully circled the number on the yellow sheet, and that would be 30,000, I wish, 30,000, 30,269,667. Yuri, do we have a second?
Second.
Kathy, all those in favor? work through sort of an interesting set of circumstances here. Are there any other items of business that we need to take up this evening? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Crystal, do we have a second?